2 wedding rings on a silver chain, a Chinese mother packing soul food lunches, children who speak in Mandarin and move to jazz. When Sarah Chen Williams drops her kids at school, the whispers follow. But how can they be siblings? Some see confusion, others see controversy. But in the face of a world that demands explanations, Sarah knows one truth. Sometimes the most beautiful stories are written between the lines of what people expect. The morning light filtered through the curtains of Sarah Chen Williams' kitchen as she packed 2 distinctly different lunches. For her daughter Lily, it was traditional Chinese dumpling, lovingly folded the way her mother had taught her. For her son Marcus, it was cornbread and collard green, a recipe passed down from his father's grandmother. Lily, with her straight black hair and almond-shaped eyes, was every bit her mother's daughter. Marcus, with his warm brown skin and tight curls, was the spitting image of his late father. At ages 12 and 10, respectively, they were just beginning to understand how unique their family was, and how complicated the world's perception of them could be. "Mom, can you braid my hair like Lily's today?" Marcus asked, watching his sister's long, straight locks sway as she grabbed her backpack. Sarah's heart squeezed. "Baby, your hair is different from Lily's. It's beautiful in its own way. Remember what Daddy used to say? Every curl tells a story," both children recited together, giggling at their mother's surprised smile. Sarah Chen Williams hadn't planned on becoming a widow at 35, raising 2 children from different marriages. Life had its own plans, as her mother always said. Her first marriage to Michael Williams had given her Marcus and taught her about Black culture, family, and resilience. After Michael's death in the line of duty as a firefighter, she'd found love again with David Chen, who became Lily's father. But a sudden heart attack had taken him just 2 years ago. Now she navigated the complexities of raising 2 children from different cultural backgrounds while honoring both of their father's legacies. It wasn't always easy, especially in their suburban neighborhood, where their family structure drew curious glances and occasional whispers. "Mrs. Williams?" The school secretary's voice always emphasized the William, subtly questioning her choice to keep both married names. "We need to discuss Marcus's emergency contact form. It seems there's some confusion." Sarah straightened her spine, already knowing what was coming. She'd been through this before, explaining why her son's emergency contacts included a Chinese grandmother and aunts who didn't share his last name or appearance. "There's no confusion," she replied firmly. "My mother, Li Wei Chen, is Marcus's grandmother. She's listed as his primary emergency contact after me." The secretary's eyes flicked between Sarah and Marcus, who sat quietly doing his homework in the corner. "It's just, for verification purposes, we need to ensure that my Chinese mother can pick up my Black son," Sarah finished quietly. "Yes, she can. She's been his grandmother since the day he was born. Would you like to see my ID, my son's birth certificate, and my marriage licenses? I keep copies handy." Later that evening, as Sarah prepared dinner, a fusion of Chinese and soul food that had become their family's unique cuisine, she overheard her children in the living room. "Why did Tommy say we're not really brother and sister?" Lily asked, her voice small and confused. "Because Tommy's stupid," Marcus replied with all the wisdom of his 10 years. "Mom says family isn't about looking the same. It's about loving the same." Sarah paused in her cooking, listening as Marcus continued. "Besides, you're lucky. You get 2 grandmas who spoil you with different kinds of cookies, and you get to celebrate twice as many holidays." The sound of their laughter warmed her heart, but she knew these conversations would only get more complicated as they grew older. She thought about Michael's mother, Gloria, who had become her rock after Michael's death, teaching her how to care for Marcus's hair and skin, sharing family recipes, and most importantly, helping her understand the unique challenges her son would face as a Black child. She remembered Gloria's words when she'd started dating David. "Love doesn't see color, baby, but the world does. You've got to prepare those children for both truths." The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. Through the peephole, she saw her neighbor, Karen Martinez, shifting uncomfortably on the porch. Karen had recently moved in and had been politely distant until yesterday when she'd witnessed an incident at the community pool. Sarah opened the door, bracing herself. The pool incident had been minor, just another parent questioning whether Marcus and Lily were really siblings, and whether Sarah was really their mother. But Karen had seen Sarah's fierce defense of her family, heard her eloquent explanation of their story, and watched as other parents had rallied around them. "I owe you an apology," Karen began without preamble. "I've been hesitant to have my kids play with yours because I didn't understand your family. Yesterday showed me how wrong I was." Sarah studied the woman's face, seeing genuine remorse. "Would you and your children like to stay for dinner? We're having my special fusion stir-fry. Chinese black bean sauce with Louisiana hot link. It's quite a story how that recipe came to be." As new friends gathered around her table that evening, Sarah watched her children proudly explain their family's traditions to Karen's fascinated kids. Marcus was teaching them how to use chopsticks while Lily demonstrated the proper way to crumble cornbread into their soup, a combination that would have raised eyebrows in either of their father's family homes, but had become perfectly normal in theirs. The story of how Sarah Chen Williams became mother to children of two races wasn't simple. It was written in tears of loss and joy, in moments of confusion and clarity, in standing up to prejudice and embracing love in all its form. But as she watched her children confidently sharing their unique heritage with others, she knew it was a story still being written. The next morning, as Sarah dropped her children off at school, the principal asked to speak with her privately. "Mrs. Chen Williams, we'd like your help with something." Principal Rodriguez led Sarah into her office, where a stack of incident reports lay on the desk. "We've had an increasing number of situations involving multiracial families and cultural insensitivity," she explained. "Your children, despite everything they face, show remarkable resilience and pride in their identity. We'd like you to help us develop a cultural awareness program for our school." Sarah thought about all the times she'd had to educate others about her family. The awkward questions, the assumptions, the well-meaning but hurtful comments. "What exactly did you have in mind?" "A series of workshops," Rodriguez suggested, "for students, parents, and staff. We need to address these issues head-on. Just yesterday, a teacher assumed Marcus was in the wrong class because his last name is Chen Williams. She didn't believe he was Chinese American." Sarah felt the familiar mix of frustration and determination rise in her chest. "He's not Chinese American genetically, but culturally. My son can speak Mandarin better than most native speakers his age. My mother made sure of that." As if summoned by mention of her name, Sarah's phone lit up with a text from Li Wei. Her mother had finally mastered emoji-laden texting, much to her grandchildren's delight. Coming for weekend, making dumplings with kids, Gloria teaching them collard greens too. The thought of her Chinese mother and black mother-in-law cooking together in her kitchen, something that had become a monthly tradition, made Sarah smile. Their unlikely friendship had begun at Michael's funeral, when Li Wei had taken Gloria's hands and said in her then-broken English, "We both his mother now. We take care together." "I'll do it," Sarah told Principal Rodriguez, "but I want to involve other families too. This isn't just about my story." Over the next few weeks, Sarah threw herself into developing the workshop series. She reached out to other multiracial families in the community, collecting their stories and experiences. What she discovered surprised her. There were far more families like hers than she'd realized, each navigating their own unique cultural intersections. One evening, as she was preparing materials for the first workshop, Lily came into her home office clutching a family photo album. "Mom, can I bring this to school tomorrow? We're doing a presentation about our family, and I want to show everyone the picture from Chinese New Year when Grandma Gloria wore the chi pao that Nai Nai made for her." Sarah's throat tightened with emotion as she recalled that moment. Gloria had proudly worn the traditional Chinese dress Li Wei had sewn, while Li Wei had learned to make perfect cornbread under Gloria's patient instruction. Their grandmothers had shown the children that love could bridge any cultural gap. "Of course you can, baby. But what about Marcus's presentation?" Lily grinned. "Oh, he's bringing the video from when you tried to teach both dads, how to use chopsticks. He says it shows that family is about learning and laughing together." The first workshop was scheduled for a Saturday morning. Sarah arrived early to set up, her children in tow, only to find the school parking lot already full. Inside the auditorium, families of all backgrounds filled the seats. Not just multiracial families, but anyone interested in learning and understanding. As Sarah prepared to speak, she saw Karen Martinez in the front row with her kids, who now had regular playdates with Marcus and Lily. Behind them sat Gloria and Li Wei, their contrasting appearances drawing curious glances that turned to smiles as they watched the two grandmothers share a package of mixed Chinese-American snack. "My story begins with love," Sarah started, her voice clear and strong. "Not just romantic love, but the kind of love that sees beyond color, beyond culture, beyond what others might expect. It's the story of two men who taught me different ways to see the world, and two children who teach me every day how to bridge those worlds." She went on to share their family's journey, the challenges, the triumphs, the everyday moments that shaped their unique identity. She talked about grocery shopping with 2 different lists for 2 different cultural cuisines, about celebrating Lunar New Year and Juneteenth with equal enthusiasm, about teaching her children to be proud of both their heritage while respecting the fact that they each carried different ones. But as she spoke, something unexpected happened. Other parents began raising their hands, eager to share their own stories. A white mother talked about adopting a Chinese daughter, and learning to do her hair properly. A Mexican father spoke about his Korean stepchildren and how they were blending holiday traditions. A black grandmother described welcoming her Japanese daughter-in-law into their family. Marcus and Lily sat in the front row, beaming with pride as their mother facilitated this outpouring of shared experience. But then Marcus raised his hand, something serious in his young face. "I want to tell everyone about last week," he said, standing up. "About what happened at the mall." Sarah's heart skipped a beat. She hadn't told anyone about that incident yet, not even the grandmothers. But as her son began to speak, she realized this was exactly what these workshops were for, giving voice to the difficult moments that shaped their lives. Marcus stood tall, his voice steady despite his youth. "We were at the mall, getting new shoes. A security guard started following us around. He kept asking Mom if she was really my mother, saying there had been incidents of kidnapping. My sister tried to explain, but he wouldn't listen." Sarah watched her son carefully as he continued, remembering how he'd handled that moment with remarkable composure. But then, Marcus smiled, something amazing happened. Mom didn't get angry. Instead, she asked the guard to call his supervisor. While we waited, she pulled out her phone and showed me pictures from the day I was born. How Dad had wrapped me in his firefighter jacket. How Nai was crying happy tears. How Grandma Gloria was teaching Mom to swaddle me properly. Lily jumped up next to her brother, and then other shoppers started standing up for us. This really nice lady said she'd seen us at dim sum last weekend. Another mom from our school came over and told the guard how Marcus won the Mandarin speaking competition last year. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes as her children recounted the story. She hadn't known they'd understood so much about what was happening that day. The best part, Marcus concluded, wasn't that the guard got in trouble. It was that Mom used it as a teaching moment. She told him, "Instead of assuming, just ask respectfully. Every family has a story worth hearing." The auditorium erupted in applause, but Sarah noticed some parents wiping away tears, others nodding in recognition of similar experiences. Principal Rodriguez stood up. "This is exactly why we need these workshops," she announced. "But I think we need to go further. Mrs. Chen Williams, would you consider helping us develop a full curriculum about diverse families for our district?" Before Sarah could respond, another hand shot up. It belonged to Dr. James Thompson, a school board member who had been quietly observing from the back. "I'd like to expand on that idea," he said, walking toward the front. "What happened at the mall isn't just about one security guard's assumptions. It's about systemic biases that affect multiracial families everywhere. In schools, hospitals, public spaces, we have an opportunity here to create real change." As discussions flourished around her, Sarah felt a tug on her sleeve. It was Karen Martinez, holding a tablet. "I hope you don't mind," she said hesitantly, "but I recorded parts of today's workshop. I'm a producer for the local news, and I think your story needs to be heard by more people. Not just your story, all of these stories." The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind. Sarah found herself balancing her real estate career with an increasing number of speaking engagements. The local news segment went viral, drawing attention from national media outlets. Schools across the state began requesting copies of her workshop material. But the real impact was happening closer to home. The incident at the mall had inspired a training program for local businesses about serving diverse families. The hospital where Lily was born invited Sarah to speak to their staff about sensitivity in medical settings. Even the police department reached out, wanting to incorporate her experiences into their community relations training. One evening, as Sarah helped Marcus with his homework, he asked a question that made her pause. "Mom, remember when you and Dad, my first dad, used to talk about being upstanders instead of bystanders?" Sarah nodded, remembering Michael's passionate beliefs about social justice. "Well, I think that's what we're doing now," Marcus continued. "But not just standing up for ourselves, we're helping other families stand up too." Li Wei, who was preparing dinner in the kitchen, called out in Mandarin, "Ji bu huo." The wise are never confused. She means, Lily translated proudly, that when you know who you are and what's right, you don't let others' confusion become your problem. Sarah marveled at how her children moved so effortlessly between languages and cultures, drawing wisdom from all their heritages. But their peaceful evening was interrupted by an urgent call from Gloria. "Baby," her mother-in-law's voice was tight with concern. "You need to turn on the news, right now." Sarah grabbed the remote, and her heart sank as she saw the headline. "Local family's story sparks controversy. Conservative group claims traditional family values under attack." The screen showed protesters gathering outside the school district office, some holding signs that made Sarah's blood boil. But before she could process this new challenge, her phone buzzed with messages of support from unexpected allies. The first was from the security guard at the mall. The security guard's message was simple: but powerful. Mrs. Chen Williams, my name is Robert Martinez. You probably don't remember me, but I'm the guard who questioned you at the mall. That day changed my life. I have a mixed-race granddaughter I haven't met because I didn't approve of my son's marriage. I'd like to make things right. Can we talk? Sarah stared at her phone, tears blurring her vision. Before she could respond, more messages flooded in, from teachers, parents, community leaders, all offering support against the brewing controversy. The protest outside the school district office was being led by a group calling themselves Family First America. Their spokesman, a polished man named Richard Hammond, was giving interviews claiming that the school's diversity curriculum was propaganda designed to undermine traditional family structures. Mom, Lily's voice was small. Do we have to stop the workshops? Sarah pulled both her children close. No, baby. If anything, this shows why we need them more than ever. Gloria arrived within the hour, bringing comfort food and determination. Li Wei came down from her evening Tai Chi class, already typing rapidly on her phone. I call my Mahjong group, she announced. All grandmothers, very powerful. We fix this. Sarah couldn't help but smile, remembering how her mother's Mahjong group included some of the most influential women in the community. Doctors, judges, business owners. But her smile faded as she watched more coverage of the protests. Then Karen Martinez called. Sarah, we need to get ahead of this story. Would you be willing to do a live interview tomorrow? Let people see your real family, not the caricature these protesters are creating. Before Sarah could answer, there was a knock at her door. Through the peephole, she saw Robert Martinez, the security guard, standing nervously on her porch, still in his uniform. Behind him was a young couple, and in the woman's arms was a baby. This is my son Michael and his wife Aisha, Robert explained when Sarah opened the door. And this is my granddaughter, Grace. I was hoping we could talk. What happened next would later be described by Karen's news team as the Living Room Summit. As protesters gathered outside the school district office, Sarah's home became a sanctuary of reconciliation and understanding. Robert shared his story of growing up with rigid beliefs about race and family, how his son's marriage had challenged everything he thought he knew, and how watching Sarah's family at the mall had forced him to confront his own prejudice. When you showed me those birthday pictures, he said, I saw love, just pure love, and I realized I was denying my granddaughter that same love because of my own fears. Michael and Aisha, initially tense, began to relax as they watched Marcus and Lily play with baby Grace. Li Wei taught Aisha how to hold the baby in a traditional Chinese comfort position, while Gloria shared her secret recipe for teething biscuits. Karen's news team captured it all. The impromptu family dinner that brought together 3 generations of different races and cultures, the honest conversations about fear and acceptance, the moment Robert held his granddaughter for the first time, while Marcus taught him a Chinese lullaby. But the most powerful moment came when Sarah's phone rang again. It was Richard Hammond, the protest organizer. Mrs. Chen Williams, he began formally. I was hoping we could discuss this situation privately, away from the media. Actually, Mr. Hammond, Sarah replied, looking around her crowded living room. I think you should join us right now. Bring your family, see what we're really about. No cameras, no speeches, just dinner and honest conversation. There was a long pause on the line. My wife, she's been asking to meet you. Our daughter is adopting a child from China, and we're struggling with how to... Dinner's at 7, Sarah said firmly. My mother's making dumplings, and my mother-in-law's making cornbread. Bring your family. Let's talk about what really matters. As she hung up, Sarah caught Marcus and Lily exchanging knowing looks. They had heard Michael's firefighter wisdom so many times. The best way to fight fear is with food and friendship. The evening was about to become even more interesting, and tomorrow's news would tell a very different story than the one the protesters had planned. But first, Sarah had a family dinner to host, one that was growing larger and more diverse with each passing hour. Robert's granddaughter had fallen asleep in Li Wei's arms, while Gloria taught Aisha how to make cornbread. The doorbell was about to ring again, and Sarah knew that whoever was on the other side would find what so many others had discovered in her home, that love doesn't need to match to be real. When Richard Hammond arrived with his family, the tension was palpable. His wife Susan clutched their daughter Rachel's hand, while Rachel's husband James stood protectively close to her, their adoption paperwork from China clutched in her other hand. But the aroma of food and the sound of laughter from the kitchen began to work their magic. We, Hammond started, then stopped, clearly thrown by the scene before him. Robert Martinez was helping Li Wei fold dumplings while his granddaughter slept peacefully in a traditional Chinese baby carrier. Gloria was teaching Aisha her secret cornbread technique, and the children were playing a mixture of Chinese checkers and African mancala. "Come in," Sarah said simply. "There's room at our table." Rachel broke away from her parents first, drawn to where Li Wei was now teaching dumpling making. We're adopting a little girl from Guangzhou," she said hesitantly. "I want to learn everything, but I'm scared I'll do it wrong." Li Wei looked up, her eyes soft with understanding. "First thing to learn, there are no wrong in love, only trying and learning. Come, I show you." As Rachel joined the dumpling making lesson, Susan Hammond approached Sarah. "Your children, they seem so happy, secure. We've been worried about Rachel's adoption, about how her child will fit in, about what people will say." "Mom," Lily called out excitedly, "can I show Mrs. Hammond my cultural identity project, the one about how being different makes us special?" Sarah nodded, watching as her daughter pulled out her carefully crafted scrapbook. Inside were photos, recipes, artwork, and stories about both sides of her heritage. There were pictures of Michael in his firefighter uniform, of David teaching her calligraphy, of both grandmothers cooking together, of Marcus winning his Mandarin competition. "See," Lily explained to Susan, "every page has something from both my culture, and here's my favorite part." She turned to a page where she'd written in careful characters, "Aime yu yan sei, love has no color." Richard Hammond, who had been standing stiffly by the door, finally moved closer. "Your curriculum, the one we've been protesting, what exactly does it teach?" Marcus looked up from his game. "It teaches that families come in all shapes and colors, like how Robert's granddaughter is going to know both African stories and Mexican legends, or how Rachel's daughter from China will have grandparents who look different but love her just the same." "Out of the mouths of babes," Gloria murmured, but her eyes were fixed on Hammond, challenging him to find fault with such simple wisdom. The evening progressed, and something remarkable happened. As food was shared and stories exchanged, the barriers began to crumble. Rachel and her husband eagerly absorbed Li Wei's lessons about Chinese culture, while Susan Hammond found herself deep in conversation with Aisha about the challenges and joys of blending family. Karen's news team, who had been filming discreetly, captured the moment when Richard Hammond finally sat down at the dumpling-making station, his hands clumsily trying to fold the delicate wrappers while Li Wei patiently guided him. "Tomorrow's headline," Karen whispered to Sarah, "will be Breaking Bread, Breaking Barriers." But the real breakthrough came during dessert, when Hammond cleared his throat. We've made a mistake. The protests, the opposition, we were fighting against something we didn't understand, something beautiful." He turned to Rachel. "Your mother and I, we were scared, not just about your adoption, but about change itself. But sitting here, seeing this," he gestured around the room, "this is what family really means." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she watched Hammond pull out his phone and make a call to his protest organizers, calling off tomorrow's demonstration. But he wasn't finished. "Mrs. Chen Williams," he said formally, would you help us develop a program for adoptive parents, something that teaches what you've shown us tonight?" Before Sarah could respond, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Principal Rodriguez, but her news wasn't about the protests or the curriculum. Instead, it was about something unexpected that would challenge their growing community in ways none of them had anticipated. "Sarah," the principal's voice was urgent, "we need your help. There's a situation at the hospital." Principal Rodriguez's voice cracked with emotion. "There's a teenage mother in the hospital. She's Chinese, the baby's father is African American, and both sets of grandparents are refusing to acknowledge the child. The hospital staff remembered your workshop and thought, maybe you could help." Sarah looked around her living room, at the unlikely group that had gathered there, at Robert Martinez cradling his mixed-race granddaughter, at Richard Hammond learning Chinese customs, at her own children bridging cultures with such natural grace. "Text me the details," she said. "I'm bringing reinforcements." Li Wei and Gloria exchanged looks, already reaching for their coats. They'd been through this before, 17 years ago, when Michael's parents initially struggled to accept his relationship with Sarah. Gloria had been the bridge then, helping them understand that love transcends race. "I'm coming too," Rachel Hammond said suddenly. "We're about to adopt a Chinese daughter into our white family. Maybe we can help them understand." The hospital halls were quiet at this late hour, as their unusual group made their way to the maternity ward. They found 16-year-old Amy Chen sitting alone in her room, tears streaming down her face as she held her newborn son. Down the hall, two sets of grandparents sat rigidly in separate waiting areas, the weight of generations of prejudice and fear keeping them apart. They won't even look at him, Amy whispered as Sarah entered. He's so beautiful, but they won't look at him. The baby was indeed beautiful, with soft curls and golden skin, his features a perfect blend of both parents. Sarah saw Li Wei's eyes soften at the sight, the same look she'd had when she first held Marcus. "Where's the father?" Sarah asked gently. "Marcus is in the cafeteria," Amy replied, and Sarah's heart jumped at the coincidence of the name. "His parents won't let him come up here. They say we've brought shame to both our families." Gloria stepped forward, her voice firm but kind. "Baby, let me tell you about another Sarah and Marcus, about fear and love, and about how sometimes it takes a whole community to help wisdom win over fear." As Gloria began sharing Sarah's story, Li Wei slipped out to find Amy's parents. She found them exactly where she had expected, in the hospital's small Buddhist shrine, seeking guidance from ancestors who had never imagined their bloodline would include a child of mixed race. "Wo ye ceng jing he ni men yi yang hai pa. I was once afraid like you are." Li Wei began in Mandarin, settling beside them. She pulled out her phone, showing them pictures of Marcus and Lily, of their family celebrations blending Chinese and African-American traditions, of the academic awards both children had won. Meanwhile, Robert Martinez had found Marcus's parents in the cafeteria. He sat down with them, his security guard uniform lending authority to his words as he told them about his own journey from prejudice to understanding, about the granddaughter he had almost lost to fear. Sarah and Rachel went to find young Marcus, who sat alone, his football letterman jacket unable to hide how very young and scared he was. "I love her," he said simply when they approached. "I love them both, but everyone acts like we've done something wrong by creating something so beautiful." Rachel touched her adoption papers unconsciously. "My parents were afraid too, afraid of having a Chinese grandchild, but tonight they learned that love doesn't need to match to be real." Back in Amy's room, both children had begun representing their own multicultural journey. Marcus, Sarah's son, taught young Marcus how to hold the baby while singing a Chinese lullaby. Lily showed Amy pictures of their family celebration, where red paper lanterns hung alongside soul food spreads. Gradually, drawn by the activity in the room, the grandparents began to drift in. They found not chaos or shame, but a celebration of possibility. Karen, who had followed with her news team, captured the moment when Amy's father first held his grandson, when Marcus's mother first saw her grandson's Chinese features curve into a smile that matched her son. "You know what this baby is?" Gloria announced to the room. "He's not half of anything. He's double blessed. 2 rich cultures, 2 strong families, twice the love, twice the wisdom." Li Wei nodded, adding in Mandarin and English, "Double joy, shuang shi." As the night deepened, something remarkable happened in that hospital room. The same transformation that had occurred in Sarah's living room began to unfold on a larger scale. Richard Hammond called his protest organizers again, but this time to request they come document this moment of healing and understanding. Nurses began stopping by, drawn by the unusual sight of what had become an impromptu cultural celebration. Someone brought traditional Chinese birth kanji from the hospital kitchen. Robert's daughter-in-law, Aisha, shared her family's traditional Islamic blessing for newborns. Principal Rodriguez arrived with a stack of children's books showing diverse families. But it was the moment when both sets of grandparents jointly asked Sarah to help them plan a proper baby celebration, one that would honor both cultures, that showed how far they'd come in just one night. As dawn approached, Sarah received another call. This time, it was from a national parenting magazine. They'd seen Karen's coverage of the Living Room Summit, and now the hospital's story was breaking. They wanted to do a feature on multicultural families and community transformation. "Actually," Sarah said, looking around the hospital room at the unlikely extended family that had formed, "I think I have an even better story for you." The baby had fallen asleep, peaceful and unaware that his very existence had just helped bridge divides that had seemed insurmountable only hours before. But Sarah knew their work was far from over. As she watched Amy's father awkwardly but earnestly attempt to learn an African-American lullaby from Marcus's mother, her phone buzzed with yet another message that would take their journey in an unexpected direction. The message was from a producer at a major network morning show. "Your story has gone viral. Communities across the country are asking how to implement your family education program. Would you be willing to share your journey with our national audience?" As Sarah stared at her phone, she felt a small hand slip into hers. It was Lily, who had been quietly observing everything through the night. "Mom," she said, wise beyond her years, "remember what you told me when I asked why some people didn't understand our family? You said sometimes people just need to see love in action. 1 year later, the auditorium of the National Convention Center was packed. Sarah stood at the podium, looking out at faces from across the country: educators, healthcare workers, social workers, and families of all configuration. Behind her sat her expanded living room summit family, now grown far beyond that first evening of dumplings and cornbread. Robert Martinez had quit his security job to run a cultural sensitivity training program for law enforcement and public service workers. His granddaughter Grace, now a toddler, sat on Li Wei's lap, babbling in a mixture of Spanish, English, and Chinese. Richard Hammond and his wife sat beside their daughter Rachel, who held her newly adopted daughter, Mai. The former protest leader had become one of the most vocal advocates for multicultural family support program. Amy and young Marcus sat with their 1-year-old son, surrounded by both sets of grandparents who had become inseparable friends, their earlier prejudices transformed into fierce pride in their shared grandson. Our story began with a rattling noise in my car, Sarah started, smiling at the memory. It led to a conversation about what makes a family, what love looks like, and how communities can transform when we open our hearts to understanding. The Family Harmony Initiative, as their program had come to be known, had spread to schools and community centers across the country. It wasn't just about multicultural families anymore. It had evolved into a movement celebrating all forms of family diversity. Gloria and Li Wei had become known as the Wisdom Grandmother, traveling to speak at conferences about bridging cultural gaps. Their Mahjong group had expanded into a nationwide network of grandparents supporting multicultural families. Marcus and Lily, now teenagers, had started a youth program called Double Blessed, helping other children from multicultural backgrounds embrace their unique identity. Their YouTube channel, featuring cooking sessions that blended different cultural cuisines, had millions of followers. But the real change, Sarah continued at the podium, happens in small moments. It happens when a security guard learns to see with his heart instead of his fears, when protesters become advocates, when grandparents learn that love has no boundary, when children teach us that being different is actually being whole. She gestured to the massive screen behind her, which showed images from their journey: the living room summit, the hospital reconciliation, community celebrations, and countless families sharing their own stories of love across cultural divides. Today, we're launching the next phase of our initiative, she announced. The Double Blessed Foundation will provide support for multicultural families, education programs for communities, and scholarships for children bridging multiple cultures. The foundation's first project would be a series of cultural community centers, starting in their hometown, places where families could gather, share traditions, and find support. The first center would be named after Michael Williams and David Chen, honoring the men whose love had started Sarah's journey. As applause filled the auditorium, Sarah looked at her children. Marcus was teaching Mai how to fold dumplings, while Lily helped Grace practice her Chinese characters. Amy's son was sleeping peacefully in his grandmother's arms, both grandmothers taking turns singing lullabies in their respective languages. The moral of our story, Sarah concluded, her voice strong with conviction, is that love doesn't need to match to be real. Family isn't about looking the same. It's about loving the same. And when we embrace our differences, we don't divide our love. We multiply it. She touched the 2 wedding rings she still wore on a chain around her neck. Every family has a story worth hearing. Every love has wisdom worth sharing. And every child born or brought into this world brings with them the possibility of bridging divides, healing wounds, and showing us that the heart knows no color. As the standing ovation washed over her, Sarah saw Karen Martinez filming one last shot for the documentary she'd been making about their journey. But the real story, Sarah knew, was still being written in homes and hearts across the country, one family at a time. Later that evening, as their extended family gathered for their traditional Sunday dinner, now a blend of Chinese dumplings, soul food, Mexican dishes, and kosher options for Rachel's in-laws, Sarah watched the beautiful chaos of children of all colors playing together, of grandparents sharing wisdom across cultural lines, of love transcending every boundary. Marcus and Lily hugged their mother from both sides, a perfect symmetry of the cultures that had shaped them. "Mom," Marcus said, "Dad, both our dads, would be so proud of what their love started." "They would," Sarah agreed, holding her children close, "because they knew what we all learned, that the most beautiful gardens grow flowers of every color, and the strongest families bloom from love that knows no bound."